One thing to bear in mind with spirit interaction and your communication with them is any judgment you have towards anything that they have done in their life will actually cause them to feel your judgment and therefore cause them to shut down in their interaction with you. Now, one of the reasons why the spirits are very open towards myself is because I don't have judgment about what they've done. Many of you, when something was said about what they've done, you had this feeling of, oh, you didn't feel that feeling that was there in you? Could you feel that? There's something in that that causes you then to get into a place of judgment of the person. Now, a spirit who's being judged is going to feel the judgment, and also it's going to be very difficult for you then to help them. Does that make sense? Naturally so. When you think about it, if you start opening your mouth to somebody and telling them about your life and all you're getting back is judgment, how are you going with your emotion in that state? Like, it's so hard, isn't it, in that state for you to move beyond that point. So it's the same with these spirits. So my suggestion is, whenever you feel that emotion pass through you of something going on here, like when that lady said that she actually mutilated her daughters, right? Even though she knew her daughters were being abused sexually by her partner, she mutilated her daughters out of jealousy. Now, how do you feel about that? You see, if you feel a feeling of judgment, right, it's going to be very hard for you to help a person like that. Does that make sense? As soon as if you can feel love for the person and understand the background that caused this, and the background that caused it was that from a very, very young age, she was tortured and sexually abused by her father. Right? So that's what created this terrible love-hate relationship with men. She wanted a man to love her, but it was all to do with sexual abuse really in the end, and then was very jealous with any woman who took a man's attention away from her. This is a common thing that happens with sexual abuse. How can you help anybody with sexual abuse if you have judgment towards that particular thing? Can you see what I'm saying? So allow ourselves, the beauty of interacting with spirits like this is we can help spirits progress very rapidly as long as we are open emotionally and sensitive to their underlying emotional causal reasons why they do things, and have some understanding and compassion and love for that. As soon as we get into judgment for it, what we're actually doing now is still trying to punish them for their act or their acts, right? No matter how evil they became, there was always a reason. And if we don't understand that and we don't feel for that, then we can't have love for them and we can't help them. There are many, many spirits in the spirit world who have been there thousands of years, who are continually receiving our judgment, and that's one of the reasons why they can't even be honest about what they've done. Right? And so we need to allow ourselves to work our way through why we judge and work our way through that emotion. And as we do that, what will happen is these spirits will feel more drawn to talk to us freely and openly so that we can actually assist them. So if you can bear that in mind, if you're one of these people, I know there's quite a number in the audience who would love to help spirits a lot more. If you can bear in mind that it's your emotional state of judgment that determines how much help you can give to somebody on earth or in the spirit world for that matter. Yeah. Anyway, is there any questions about that, what we just went through? We'll have a few questions. Robin, and then up the back. We come down the front here first. And then up the back. I
was just wondering, with the people that we just worked with in spirit, the fathers in virtually every case, the fathers of the spirits that was speaking were involved in, sort of the ongoing lineage of those deeds. Were those spirits around? Was there any sensing that they were involved or?
Robin, it's so interesting that you see thought the fathers were there, because actually the fathers and mothers were just as liable for their behaviour. All right. So there's something there to look at for yourself in terms of just feeling the fathers not being around. Their mothers weren't either. All right?
It's just that in every case you mentioned that it was the father in the link.
Yeah, well, I only pointed out a few of their emotions that were right there on the surface. The truth is every one of them had just as deep emotions to work through with their mothers, but the father emotion was the one holding them in a state of stagnation. So in other words, it was their rage towards the masculine that was holding them in a state of stagnation in many cases. Does that make sense? Yeah. But what they're not realising is that many of them have even more rage with their mother than they do with their father, but they'll go through that emotionally as time progresses. Yeah.
And would those parents, I'll use the word parents now, were they there? Were they around? Could you feel?
No. Those parents are in darker conditions and not even drawn to come to a group like this. Yep. So they are in the hells of the spirit world in a very dark condition and not even in a place of self-reflection at this point. The man who damaged his daughter with sexual abuse is still on the earth connecting with men who sexually abuse girls, little girls, right? So he's not in a place where he will even begin to look at his emotion for some time yet. Yeah. So unfortunately that's what happens a lot, is that many of these abusers who pass connect with other people on earth who have the same emotions and through them continue to abuse in the same manner in which they did before they passed. Yeah.
One more thing. Can you, I don't know how to express this, can you judge the crime and not the perpetrator? Because, I mean, I think quite a few of us were teary in some of those cases because we were feeling for the little girls or for the people, for the soldier with the spear through his chest, who may have been killed by that first man. Yeah. Is it possible to sort of feel judgment of and sort of sickened by the act, but not towards the perpetrator?
Sickened by the act is always driven by an unhealed emotion within yourself. You will get to a point of compassion for all acts that are perpetrated. You won't agree with them, and you'll see them as the result of evil emotions within the person. The problem isn't the act. The problem is the emotion that drives the act. You see, on the earth, we're happy as long as somebody doesn't act. Well, God's laws don't talk about and don't even deal with actions. Do you know what they deal with? They all deal with emotions. So the truth is we need to start getting away from the act and start looking at the emotion that caused the act. Does that make sense? When we start examining the emotion that caused the act, we start understanding. Before that time, it's very, very difficult to have any understanding because all we feel is sickened by the act, not understanding that any of us, with a certain set of emotional conditions, with a certain set of situations, with a certain set of suppression, may in fact finish up doing one of those acts that we ourselves feel sickened about. And many of these people now feel sickened about what they did. And if we focus on the act, and as soon as you focus on the act, you're getting away from them focusing on the emotion. You see, every time you just felt sick about what they said, straight away you took them away from feeling their emotion about why they did what they did. Does that make sense to everyone? So while we may feel very justified in feeling like sickened by the act or whatever, in the end, most of the time that is driven by the emotion inside of ourselves that we're avoiding, and the emotion is, you know, sometimes fear about that act or sadness about that act or whatever. And what we're doing is we're driven by that emotion, and that causes then this automatic judgment to occur on the person. Even the feeling of being sickened by the act causes the person to avoid their causal emotion. So if you came to me and you told me you had 5 abortions, right, and I felt sickened by that, would you have continued discussing with me about what happened with these abortions? Can you see? You probably wouldn't have. You would have felt my disgust and my sickness about the act and felt like I'm not the person you could talk to about that particular thing and what was underneath it. Can you see that? And the same applies to these people. Every single person on this planet and every single person in the spirit world that's ever done anything harmful needs to have understanding before they are going to change. And the only way they're going to get understanding is for us to get out of the state where we judge the act and start looking at the emotion that drove the act. And when I'm in that state where I don't judge the act anymore and I'm looking at the emotion that drove the act, now the person will be able to speak to me about the emotion that drove their act, that they themselves are ashamed of. They don't need me projecting more at them, because they're already in a state where they've seen the damage of the act. But they don't understand why they did it, and that's the hard part, and that's the part that most people are totally stuck on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They don't understand why. And what we need to do is have the compassion to actually see the act as actually the evidence of the emotion and look at the emotion instead. Does that make sense, Robin? A bit of personal things in there for you that I mentioned. Yeah.